week 10 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few wide receivers I would bench this week. The first guy, Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. So Thielen, it's been a weird season for him. Some big games and some mediocre games throughout the season for him. So the last few games for Thielen, week 6 at Carolina, 11 catches, 126 yards, and a touchdown. Week 8 versus the Dallas Cowboys, he got off to a hot start in that one with a touchdown on the first drive, but he only finished the game with 6 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown. And last week at Baltimore, a late touchdown in the fourth quarter saved his fantasy day. Only 2 catches, 6 yards, and a touchdown. So right here, week 10, it's a tough matchup for the Minnesota Vikings and Thielen on paper versus the Los Angeles Chargers that give up the second least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. And it seems like this season, Justin Jefferson and Thielen, they both don't have big games on the same game. So right here, I think one of these guys might have a decent game, but this week I think Thielen has a down game, especially after the last 2 weeks where he's went invisible most of the game with the touchdowns saving his fantasy day. So if I got better options, I would bench him this week. The second receiver is Jarvis Landry of the Cleveland Browns. So Odell Beckham Jr., we know he's out of town. Him and the Browns parted ways last week on a release. So Jarvis Landry, the number 1 receiver over there on the depth chart in Cleveland, and he hasn't done much at all this fantasy season. The last 3 weeks here for Landry, week 7 versus Denver, 5 catches, 37 yards. Week 8 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, 5 catches, 65 yards, a fumble loss, and 5 rushing yards. And then week 9 at Cincinnati, you figured in a 41-16 victory, he would have a big game, but he only showed up with 3 catches, 11 yards. And right here in week 10 in New England, I believe Bill Belichick and this defensive game plan is going to take Landry out of it and make other receivers like People-Jones and Higgins try to beat this Patriot defense. And with the inconsistencies and the injuries throughout the year, I just can't trust Landry as a wide receiver to start this week. And I would bench him because the Patriots also give up the 9th least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. The next wide receiver I would bench this week is DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers, DJ Moore here, pretty tough matchup at the Arizona Cardinals. And it doesn't help that the fact that Sam Darnold's going to be out a few weeks now with a shoulder injury. So XFL standout quarterback PJ Walker will get the start. And I don't know if Walker's really going to get the ball down the field much in this game. And I could see this game be an early blowout by this Arizona Cardinal team where their game plan is to stop DJ Moore and obviously Christian McCaffrey. But right here, DJ Moore's been struggling the last few weeks as well. Week 7 at the Giants, 6 catches, 73 yards. Week 9 at the Falcons, only 4 catches, 59 yards. And week 9 versus the Patriots, 3 catches, 32 yards. So right here, week 10, mediocre matchup on paper, but the injury to Darnold and just the bad ball games over the last few weeks for Moore, I think he's a wide receiver I would get away from this week and bench him. The next wide receiver is Jacoby Myers of the New England Patriots. So Jacoby Myers, he's been up and down this season as the number 1 receiver on this Patriot team. And this Patriot team, they're mostly built on defense and running the football this year. So Jacoby Myers, he's failed to reach double-digit fantasy points in the last 3 games. Week 7 versus the Jets, 5 catches, 44 yards. Week 8 at the Chargers, 4 catches, 32 yards, and a 2-point conversion. And week 9 at the Panthers, only 1 catch for 8 yards. So right here, week 10 versus the Cleveland Browns, I think impressive corner Denzel Ward's going to be covering Myers in this game. And right here, in my opinion, Belichick and this team, they just love running the football. No matter if it's Harris, Stevenson, or obviously Brandon Bolden. So right here, they're not going to throw the football much in this ball game, in my opinion. I think it's going to be a grinded out type of game between the Browns and the Pats. And I think whose ever running game is better is going to win this game, and defense, obviously. So I don't see Myers doing much, and this one is ceiling's probably 8 and 9 fantasy points. And in PPR leagues, that's just not getting the job done, in my opinion. And a wide receiver I will bench this week, Laviska Shenault of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Shenault this season, a lot of people had high hopes for him coming into the year, especially with Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback this year. But the last few weeks hasn't been anything great here for Shenault. Week 6 versus Miami, 6 catches, 54 yards. Week 8 at Seattle, 2 catches, 13 yards. And week 9 versus Buffalo, 4 catches, 24 yards. So on paper, I know it's a good matchup at the Indianapolis Colts here in week 10 that give up the 5th most points to wide receivers. But right here, I just don't see Chenault having a good game. I see Indianapolis really locking in once again in this ball game and playing good defense. I know last week they gave up 30 points to the Jets, but that ball game was pretty much over at halftime when it was 21-3, and the Jets had a lot of garbage time. And we know this offense has been struggling over here in Jacksonville, and Chenault is a guy who hasn't done much this season, and I just wouldn't trust him, so I would put him on the bench this week. So that's a few wide receivers I would bench in week 10 of the fantasy football season.